welcome to this week's Three Legs, Four Wheels F1 podcast. It's Paul here with
Dan, Chris,
Sean.
You're joining us this week.
Apparently so.
welcome.
Hello, Sean.
Welcome
Hi.
along. No Lee this week, but a definitely better replacement.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
You know what you're talking about.
I'm better as in physically better as well, because Lee is non-physically capable.
Lee
this
is
week.
sick.
Lee is unwell.
Very much.
Lee is sick and unwell.
Although I have a bit of a cough, so if I am coughing throughout, I do apologise in advance.
You might have already been, but we could be breaking time.
I have, but this is the intro, so...
Let's
we,
break
Yes.
time.
we always
Yay.
make breaking time jokes. Shall we have a jump cut?
Go on,
Yes.
Well, with testing and all the launches out the way, who better to talk about everything new for 2019 with than Craig Scarborough? Craig, thanks for coming back on.
Hello.
Thanks for welcoming me back. Yeah, happy New Year, and it's shaping up to be quite interesting, actually, isn't it?
It is a bit. We saw quite a lot of things in testing that we weren't expecting. Ferrari speed, Mercedes possibly sandbagging, and the disaster that's Williams. We've got a lot to talk about with that.
Yeah, and everything in between as well.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's kind of 10 garages worth of what the hell's going on. Where do we start? Somebody want to throw something out?
Well, start at the sharp end, because that's where everything seems to be. That's where all the interest is, isn't it? Are Ferrari as fast as they seem? Because we've seen this before, haven't we? Ferrari have absolutely smashed testing in the past. We've had Sean Kelly on before who said, yes, that's it, Ferrari have won the Winter World Championship. He said it a couple of years ago. But
Yes,
they've never
yeah.
won the Summer World Champ. Well, not in a few years now. Not won the Summer World Championship. So what can we actually tell from the sharp end of testing?
Well, I mean, I think a lot of people read way too much into testing. I think that's kind of a truism. I mean, I remember when the testing started, even this year, within a couple of hours, it's, so and so has set a blistering time, and it's like, it doesn't matter. But you can read some sort of fairly basic facts into it. Yes, Ferrari are well prepared. They don't have a problem with their car. And clearly it's very quick, and as you can tell from the onboards, it appears to be a very easy car to drive. On both the sort of quali sims that they did and on the race things, when you look at the car itself, it's very much an evolution of what Ferrari have been doing for the last few years. They've changed the side pods and cooling around a bit. You can tell by the roll hoop it's a bit more triangular now, that they've taken some of the packaging out of the cooling above the engine and packaged it down, and we actually saw some Spanish spy pictures that they've repackaged the engine slightly. Be a bit interesting to know exactly what they've done in that area. And obviously they've adapted to the new rules as well. And I think the big thing that everyone's noticed on the Ferrari is the front wing, which we all now call it the Sauber front wing, even though technically Sauber doesn't exist, and it's not as if they've copied Sauber anyway, because Ferrari, Alfa Romeo, as Sauber should be called, but I continually forget. And Toro Rosso will come up with very much the same sort of concept with front wing. But yeah, Ferrari really look like they've got everything ready for the start of the season, as they have done for quite a few years now. And obviously we'll come to talk about Mercedes, but as Sean put it, it's the Winter Championship. You've got the week of the launches. It's almost like a design competition. Who's got the best design car? Then you have testing. Who's got the best car? But the litmus test really is how that car performs at the heat and the variety of circuits that we have, through the season, and how they develop that car through the year, which really Ferrari haven't been very good at their in-season development. Certainly last year, they just got to the point where they were looking like they might be invincible, mid-season, sort of pre-Silverstone. And then the second half of the season, they weren't making progress anywhere. And very rapidly lost out to Mercedes, that did a huge amount of work on the car mid-season to late season, which almost certainly, retained the championship for them. Yeah. So, Ferrari quick in testing doesn't mean that they're going to win the world championship automatically, because, we've got, I'm trying to add out how many months it is now. It's got like 9 months of racing between now and then. So a lot can change. But, again, I think the key thing is that Ferrari are there or thereabouts. and they haven't kind of fallen down a pit or made some mistakes, because we've had the personnel changes with Benotto now stepping up to be team principal rather than just technical director. Obviously, Arriva Bene's gone. We have this interim head of Ferrari there as well. And there appears to be some stability in the team, which for Ferrari is always a good thing.
It's not a very Ferrari thing of late.
No, exactly. I mean, I think that there was aspects of last season which were perhaps, sort of typically Ferrari. But certainly the rise of Benotto through the team, and certainly over the winter taking, as I say, the team principal role. I mean, he seems to be a very steady, very calm pair of hands. He's not one for histrionics and sort of snap judgments. And I think you can tell that a bit from over the winter, that there weren't big staff changes around Ferrari. That often happens when they feel that they've lost out on something and there must be a scapegoat. They've lost quite a few good engineers over the years, by doing that. So I mean, I think, in summary, I think you've got to say that Ferrari are looking good, they're looking competitive, but, don't read into that the championship is, within one of their hands already.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see. Obviously, we're not going to get to see a great deal of this till we get well into Australia, and then maybe not then. But they were being more secretive than normal over the floor on the car. When Vettel had the off on Thursday of the second week, the first thing he did when they were putting the shroud on the car before they got it onto the flatbed was made sure that the floor was covered. So it looks like they've done some quite heavy work on that as well, because he was making a point of telling people, get the floor covered first.
Yeah, I mean, at the back of the floor, there isn't an awful lot you can really kind of do now, and it's very easy with knowing the photographers to get good shots of the diffuser of the car. I mean, the pit lane exit at Barcelona is almost perfect. But Ferrari have always been through testing one of the most secretive, I think probably only beaten by Red Bull, that would literally have the car drive into a tent in the pit lane and have the mechanics run along with under some kind of gazebo before the car got into the garage. It's that ridiculous testing secrecy that we have. But, I mean, Ferrari have got some, we saw that their development late last year where the edge of the floor in particular seems to be an area of big development for the teams, putting lots of slots along the edge of the floor, and Ferrari then started to add fins above that as well, as high as the regulations allow. And we've seen other teams, Toro Rosso, Renault, Mercedes, I'm trying to remember if it was Red Bull as well, all following some of those design aspects of the Ferrari in that area. But, the floor remains the most important aerodynamic part of the car, as much as we'll talk about other aspects of the car. At the end of the day, that's the thing that does the lion's share of the work. So, teams will always cover that over. I mean, I haven't seen anything on the Ferrari that, in terms of the floor area at least, that would suggest that, they've got something particularly clever going on there. But I think we'll see a lot more of that when we get to Melbourne.
Yeah, would you subscribe to the fact that a lot of people seem to be saying, you talk about the repackaging of the Ferrari engine, that they've gone for a lot slimmer back end on the Ferrari in 2019, so almost like kind of like the Red Bull philosophy of following on from the old McLaren philosophy that a skinnier back end is better. Do you think the Ferrari looks slimmer at the back end?
It does, and it's unfortunate. It's one of these very visual things. If you took the top three cars, the Ferrari, the Red Bull, and the Mercedes, they've all probably end up, if you could measure the volume inside the bodywork kind of from behind the cockpit and from the front of the side pods backwards, they've probably all got exactly the same amount of volume of space inside the bodywork. They've just squeezed it into different shapes.
Right.
So Red Bull have this very jelly molded side pod shape. Mercedes have gone very narrow this year, all the way along length, which is one of the reasons the Merc haven't followed the Ferrari side pod philosophy. Ferrari a bit more conventional, but what they've done is they did what McLaren did last year, and unfortunately McLaren did in their first Honda year, which was to try and slim everything above the engine to the minimum. And have that top part of the bodywork as slim as possible. And as you can see, the Ferrari actually has bulges to get the exhaust out from the gearbox, out through the bodywork. So they've just gone for a slightly different shape to everybody else. I don't think they've done anything especially radical. It's just, they've put squeezed the bodywork into different shapes to Red Bull and Mercedes. And I think all of them are equally valid. and I don't think anyone needs to copy anyone else to change their sort of philosophy or anything. But it's interesting how different these things can be when so much of the rest of the car now is becoming almost, I've been describing it as cookie cutter. Everyone's got similar side pods, similar wings, similar
Yeah.
barge boards. There's not a lot of scope to play about with different shapes, and the main shape of the side pod is about the only piece remaining now. But yeah, certainly Ferrari's done a lot of work in the repackaging of the top end of that engine where the air inlets are and the plenum for the air inlets, which is very different to what they've done in the past, which again, I don't want to suggest anything that I don't know to be true, but I wonder if they have done something more radical with the engine packaging, maybe going to a Mercedes split turbo or changing something around that sort of area of the car at the top end to move the packaging about a bit to get that bodywork to be as slim as it is.
Yeah, we heard a statement out of sort of joint one between Red Bull and Honda saying that they're looking at changing the engine packaging already over the next couple of weeks. So I didn't particularly notice them run into any problems, but have they found improvements, do you think? Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think almost definitely when Red Bull technology, when we talk about Red Bull Racing and Toro Rosso, started to talk to Honda about what they were going to do with the power unit for this year, I'm sure there was some Adrian Newey and aero packaging-led discussions as to what shape they want the engine. Where do they want to put the exhaust? Do they want them down low? Do they want them in tight? Do they want them up high? And the same with the inlets and stuff. And all of that does push the engine designers to make compromises, because at the end of the day, its aero makes up so much more performance than even engine performance does in some respects. And that will always lead to, hot spots inside the engine installation. And there was also lots of rumours about vibration. I'm not quite sure where this comes from, because there's not a lot you can do with the current engine regulations to introduce vibration in an unwanted way into the engines. So I think that's a bit odd. So they probably are talking about it, maybe easing some of that back. Again, we haven't really had a chance to have a look at the back of the Red Bull in detail. I mean, I've seen the back of the Toro Rosso in spy pictures, and that looks very similar to what they had last year. So I'm not quite sure the areas that they're worried about. But again, as we saw on track, the Red Bull was incredibly reliable. Honda put in a lot of mileage. I don't think they did more mileage than any other engine manufacturer necessarily, but certainly there was no big losses in time like they had previously. Perhaps equally similar to last year, they had a really good testing phase before they then really started to push the engine through the season. And I think the fact that Honda and Red Bull are working very well, and they're very open and very honest and admitting of each other, which hasn't been the case with Red Bull with previous engine partners, shall we say, without mentioning any names.
Or Honda with previous car partners.
Well, I mean, I think Honda have always have been, very uncritical of their partners. I think it's very much the Honda way. I mean, I think it just goes to show that this is a much better relationship that you're getting between Red Bull technology and Honda. And we saw that with Toro Rosso last year. We saw that, immediately things were working much better. When there were problems, it was all kind of, everything was up front and out in the open, and there wasn't any kind of finger pointing or we're just complaining because you've got a down on power engine or it just keeps blowing up. It's like, we're in this, we're going to get through it. And, that seems to be continuing this year. So, I hope that continues, because I don't like it. I mean, I didn't like the attitude that Red Bull had over recent years towards, their engine partners. I don't think it was professional. I don't think it was helpful. But, when you then look at the Red Bull pace, it's pretty much where you would expect it to be if it still had the Renault engine in them. So, it shows that very much that the Honda engine is on a par with the Renault engine that was in the back of the car previously. So, that has to be, a good first step for the partnership.
There's that pronounced bulge, though, isn't there, that we saw on the McLarens and last year's Toro Rosso. There's now appeared on the Red Bull, with the obviously the Honda needs like a bigger air inlet than than the other power units. It's just appears to be. It surprises me that they're now thinking of repackaging it so late on, even after testing. 'Cause obviously the bodywork's already been it's been put into production. It's been remolded. It's these parts are the tolerances are tiny already. So I mean, there's not to me it doesn't seem like there's an awful lot they can actually change.
Well, I mean, I think what you'll find is that they signed off the testing bodywork quite some time ago. It's one of the first things that teams sign off. And Red Bull didn't really have many modifications to the car through testing in terms of, big chunks of new bodywork. So they probably have something fairly substantial to be changed for Melbourne, which of course will already have been signed off, is already in production. There's nothing they can do to change that. So they would now be looking towards, if it was something critical, towards some of the last of the initial flyaway races, but more likely looking towards the Spanish Grand Prix package. Which will still be in the wind tunnel, still be getting signed off by the team ready for going into production. Because obviously Spain isn't that far away now in terms of production timescales to get the big bits and pieces done. It's probably a bit early for Honda to make any changes to the power unit. It's a bit early in its cycle, really, isn't it? Because it'll have to last, to probably Canada before you would want to do a power unit change. But again, that it really depends where their problems are. Is it something big and fundamental in the, the structural parts of the engine and the packaging that you can't change, or is it just in, things like the wiring units, the airbox ducting, stuff like that you can change without it being part of the, engine life cycle. So, there's hope for them to do a bits and pieces under the skin fairly rapidly if they feel that that's necessary. But again, we've not really been given any clues as to what these problems are. So we'll just keep an eye on that. And it'd be nice to see the car without its bodywork at Melbourne, just to start to understand how this has all been put together. Because from what I can see on the Toro is very similar to the packaging we saw last season.
One thing that did catch a lot of people out was Mercedes. The switch in everything on the car from week 1 to week 2.
It was essentially a B-spec.
It was, just completely rewritten everything to bring out for the second week. That's not usual, putting that many new parts on the car all at once. So was the car for the first week more of a token effort, do you think? And what we saw in the second week of testing was closer to what we're actually going to see competing?
Well, I mean, I think Mercedes, to be fair to Mercedes, they have had a record of bringing, lots of big changes to the car late on in testing. There's always been a point everyone's been going, they're going to have a new nose tomorrow, they're going to have this change tomorrow. And, we have seen some fairly big sort of chunky changes through testing. And this year didn't seem to be an exception. But I think, as you say, they've gone a bit more radical. And as I said before, it's, the teams will sign off the initial testing aero package very early in order to get that into production, so that it's not, the production of that bodywork isn't interrupting all the other millions of bits and pieces that need to be made for the car in the run up to the first test. So that's just kind of a bit of good housekeeping. And again, the first test, it's very much for testing the car's systems. It's not necessarily about performance.
No.
It's lap times. There is an aspect of tyre testing going on there. But again, the teams are able to simulate the cars so well on their software that they know that the aero package that they've got and that they'll be going to, they know what the change in step will be. So, there's lots that they can predict still from a test with, a slightly non-relevant aero package. But contrary to lots of reports during the first week and even reports after the, as you say, that B-spec level package was introduced at the second test, that was always going to be the case. It wasn't a reaction. It wasn't, oh my God, we're really slow at the first test. We've got dreadful high-speed understeer. We've got to change our philosophy on the car completely, which is a lot of people were talking about. And there's obviously complete nonsense. They said they always plan to bring the big 2019 package to the second test, which is not unusual for them. And that does mean that they get slightly less track time playing with that. But I'm not unduly concerned by their performance during testing. We know that Mercedes are able to engineer a bad car, or at least a sensitive car, or a diva, whatever you want to call it, very well through the year. That one of the great things that Mercedes have got, and perhaps Ferrari haven't had, is this in-season development. So even if they do start with a very good, perhaps even if it's the best car out there, sometimes that setup is what they've struggled with, the tyres that they've struggled with, and they've just worked through those problems and come back to win championships. So I don't see that there's any major difference this year in Ferrari and Mercedes where they are relevant to each other going into the first race. I wouldn't be surprised if Ferrari go out and win the first race, because I think Melbourne is a circuit much better suited to the Ferrari. It depends very much on the weather and the tyres and bits and pieces. But, I think Mercedes will very soon come back very strong. They'll find the balance in the car. They'll find the setup over those first few races, and we'll hopefully have a really strong championship throughout all of the races through to the back end of the year, which I think it is December it finishes this year, isn't it? I think
it is, yeah.
Slightly rolls over into the start of December, which is a shocking thought already. So I mean, I think a lot of people are getting quite panicky. I think the Mercedes haters are kind of jumping on this. The Mercedes fans are getting a bit worried and being a bit over defensive. But really, this is just the usual ebb and flow of car development through testing in the first races.
I mean, the tyres do seem to be a little bit more of the great unknown this year. Lewis Hamilton was saying that the car would have worked better on last year's spec tyres rather than this year's, but that's not going to happen.
They're all in the same boat, aren't they? Really?
Yeah, everyone's got the same tyres to choose from. So
exactly, I think someone's always going to complain about the tyres, even if for 9 of the 10 teams they work fantastically. The 10th team will always moan, particularly at the sharp end of the grid. But I think what Pirelli have done this year is going the right sort of direction. They're trying to play about with the operating temperatures to make them a bit more consistent for the teams to aim for. There's a bigger gap between the compound performance, which should mean that we get people playing about with strategy a bit more, which really kind of killed a lot of the races last year. That I think pretty much every race, the quickest option, or quickest two options, was normally a one stop, which really doesn't give you a chance to do anything with strategy. And they know that these cars are going to be quick this year already. If you look at the pole time and the quickest of the testing times, these cars are as quick. They run a lot more drag. They're a lot slower on the straight, which means they're going even quicker through the corners, which is a shocking thought. And last year's tyres were struggling through the corners. We saw back end of the year when all the teams really got into their stride, lots of blistering. So these thin tread, narrow, thin gauge tyres really should allow some slightly better racing, but equally you can't go out and abuse them in the first few laps of a stint. There's still some time management to go on there, and I think it is part of Formula One that the drivers need to manage their tyres, and the tyres need to cope with everyone from Mercedes that go flying around the corner at 5G, and sad to say, teams at the back of the grid that are, almost 2 seconds off the pace. The Pirelli are supplying tyres for 10 teams, not just, one driver or one team.
Do you think we're looking at a 2-horse race for the title between Ferrari and Mercedes again? Or do you think somebody else can muscle in and join in with the fight?
I think, given the length of the season, I think it would be a 2-horse race. And that's not to denigrate Red Bull, because I think Red Bull are going to be very competitive. They'll win races, they'll be setting pole laps. But I just think over the length of the season that we've got, that the Honda package will let them down slightly. I think there will be some unreliability there as Honda, because Honda are still trying to push to get to the performance level of Ferrari and Mercedes. Now, you either do that on track through the season and suffer the reliability, or you wait a whole year, have reliability, but you have to wait for the winter break to get some performance. So I think that will hamper their championship challenge, which I think is a shame, But I think we'll have some great racing as a result of it, though, because when they're on form and when when the engine's holding together, I think Red Bull are going to be right in there on pace. The majority of races, and I think what's quite interesting is the midfield. I don't think they've closed the gap, but I think the midfield are now, sort of the Renaults, the Haases, even sort of Toro Rosso and potentially even McLaren, could be there to pressure those teams. And, it will be hard to get podiums for those sort of midfield teams, but I think that could be possible this year. Because I think the grid is squeezed up a little bit. But I think we'll have to see quite how that shakes out over the first few races.
And is there any clear pecking order in the midfield now? Because from what I was seeing, it looked like there's possibly one team that's definitely at the back, and then 3 teams at the front. And the middle, is there anything between them?
No, I mean, I really don't think there is. And again, I think that will ebb and flow through the year. It will depend on the circuit, depending on the weather and the tyres, much like we had last year. The first half of the season, I don't think any of us could really pick out who was the best team in the midfield. I mean, obviously Haas lost some race results early on in the season because of the pit stop problems, but they were looking really strong, and that would have changed their season. Force India had their problems. Renault had their reliability issues. And I think that's going to be the same this year. I mean, I don't think testing really has given us a very clear view of, that midfield pack, other than, I'm glad to say McLaren seemed to have kind of rejoined it a bit from sort of slowly drifting backwards last year. And, as you say, it's terrible to see, Williams kind of languishing at the back, but I'm not quite sure what their route back to the midfield really is. They're already on the back foot at the beginning of testing. By the end of the testing, they hadn't seemed to have improved. And, it's just a worry for any Formula One fan to see a team like that really, sort of unable to get their act together.
I mean, that was the thing that we noticed with Williams. There wasn't one specific thing that they were getting wrong. It was just problems in every department. The car was late being manufactured. Towards the end of the second week, they had to cut short running because they were running low on spares. It's one of the sorriest things to see. And, having followed Williams for as long as I have, and I'm sure the rest of us feel the same.
Yeah, absolutely.
No, I don't think anyone likes to see a Formula One team struggling. Even the minnows that came in 2010, was it?
Yeah.
I think we all kind of rooted for the back markers to kind of get in there and get some results in. And no one likes to see a team struggle, let alone a team like Williams. And I raise the point every time I talk about them. It's Williams Grand Prix engineering, and it's the engineering that are letting the team down as the symptom, shall we say. But I think the cause isn't necessarily Paddy Lowe or the engineers. I think there's much more deep-seated problems at Williams than the techies that they have there. And I think they've got a problem with their long-term planning, with the budget, with the management direction, and I think the team really does need a serious kick up the backside and potentially even a restructure in order to get it to where it needs to be, which is at least amongst the rest of the midfield. Always someone has to come 10th in the Constructors' Championship out of 10 teams. It's an unavoidable fact. But I think if you've had a competitive year and you end up 10th, then that's it's just how the dice rolls. But if you've had a uncompetitive year, and you're always at the back of the grid and you're always at at last in the race, then I think that's a really bad thing. And I just don't get this feeling that Williams have that motivation to have that big shake-up that I feel desperately need in order to find some level of recovery. And I think this year has just been symptomatic of what we've seen over a number of seasons with Williams, really.
Well, we've been saying for the last few months, bring Patrick Head back because they all need shouting at and nobody does it like him.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I think there is, I think possibly the only person that probably could do this now, given Frank Williams' state of health probably would be Patrick Cumming, and I think he would be epic in that role. And if we could ever get a documentary about that, I think I would love to watch it. It might be tough viewing at various points, but yeah, I mean, I think that's exactly what they need. I think there really is some serious sort of kicking up the backside that's needed there to get the team back in. And as much as I say it's Patrick Head, again, I'm not pointing at the engineering side of the team here. I don't think that's where the fundamental problem lies, but I think something does need to be done there now.
Yeah, definitely. We touched on the Sauber Alfa Romeo wing and nose earlier. That seems to be massively different to everybody else. And is this a gamble that could well pay off for them and obviously for Ferrari as well, with having a slightly different arrangement of the front wing planes, because it seems to be very, very loaded on the nose side rather than the end plates, and it just came as a little bit of a surprise to see such a radical change compared to everywhere.
It was.
else.
I mean, I think we all saw those spy pictures as Alfa Romeo tested in that Valentine's livery, which I wish was still on the car.
Why are testing liveries always better than the real
Red
thing?
Bulls are always better as well. Red Bull are another one that do this.
It's a ridiculous situation that all of the. I mean, you look at all of the liveries. There's only a couple of exceptions, I would say, on the grid. But the majority of them are absolutely dreadful. And if they can produce a test delivery that's stunning, then race with it, for God's sake. But yeah, I mean, talking about that front wing, I mean, I saw those pictures and I was initially confused because I wasn't sure, as everyone else thought, as maybe there's just some bits haven't been fitted yet. But when you actually then went and looked at it, and then I sort of thought about it from the technical point of view, it's not an idea. I mean, my sketch pads was full of front wing ideas and tricks and things to recreate the performance lost from the 2018 wings, and that one didn't come up in my book, even though I perhaps, in retrospect now, I was given a little tip off about it without realizing. But I would say it's not a gamble. I mean, it's a radical looking front wing, but it's not something that is, like some sort of big concept ideas something sometimes come up with that's a big risk and kind of they've invested everything in it. This is something that's quite straightforward to model and to understand in CFD and in the wind tunnel. And obviously, as we saw from testing for Ferrari at least, that concept wing works. And I think what it is, why it's hard for us all to understand why would that wing work is because we've all been kind of brainwashed over a number of years, seeing these huge, complicated front wings that we saw kind of reaching their peak at the end of last year, that was all about downforce, but it wasn't. And as much as I've witted on endlessly over the past few seasons about outwash and tyre wake management, the majority of the front wing design that we've seen is all about airflow management, and particularly about the turbulence that comes off of the front tyre and stopping that hit in the back of the car, so that when you have all of the bits taken off it and you can't use those tricks, then you can basically kind of cut off the bit of the wing that was doing that job. And that's what Sauber, Ferrari, and to an extent sort of Toro Rosso have done, because all of that bit of wing in front of the front tyre is only there to push airflow out around the front tyre. So by getting rid of that, it allows the end plate to be opened up slightly differently, and it also allows the airflow that comes off the tip of the wing, as low as it is, to actually better manage the airflow off of the front tyre.
I'm just looking at a picture of the Sauber front wing here. Do you think they took any inspiration from Chase Carey's moustache?
If it is, then I think you'd have to suggest that their nose design therefore suggests that Chase Carey should have 3 nostrils. But yes, maybe it always helps to have the rights holder on your side, as we've known through the Bernie years. If he's your mate, then all sorts of things can happen for you. Yes, it is very odd to look at, isn't it? And
does that change the whole?
Look at the other...
Sorry, Craig. Does that change the whole philosophy of how Alpha Sauber have done their aero package though? Because if they've done their new regulation front wing like this, and nobody else has really left that massive gap at the end of the wings, that changes the way the air flows over the whole car, because the front wing is where the air hits it first, clearly. But that's not going to be like an easy fix if they realise they've gone the wrong way, is it? So have they looked at certain circuits and thought, well, we can capitalise on high-speed corners, for example, or there's just one area where they're hoping they can capitalise and score bigger points than the rest of the midfield?
Yeah, I don't think that they would change that wing concept massively between Monaco to Monza.
Yeah.
Any more than teams would normally change their front wing concept between those races. Again, a lot of people, you look at it and you think, well, the wing's not big enough to create the downforce it needs, but it can, because it's the bit that goes from the front tyre inwards that creates the downforce, not the bit on the outside. So, it works from a downforce point of view. And the other thing, and again, a lot of people were talking about teams reacting to that now and trying that direction. The good thing about that concept from Sauber's point of view, probably works against them from, like I say, I'll use the word Sauber. I'm not going to start saying Alfa Romeo. I've got it stuck in my head now. Is that because that's the outboard section of the front wing, and yes, any aero designer for a car ends up being very holistic. But that is an area where you can play about with much more, because it's not affecting the airflow directly over the rest of the kind of the central bodywork, the chassis, large boards, the side pods, to the rear wing and diffuser, because all of the flow from that aspect of the front wing goes out around the front tyre, and ideally should go out around the outside of the rear tyre as well. So it's a bit more modular than maybe other aspects of aero to change. Not to say that it's not a straightforward job, but other teams could relatively quickly catch up. And if Sauber or anyone, Ferrari, Toro Rosso, felt that wasn't working for them, could go to another wing design, much quicker than if they'd suddenly found something miraculous on the barge boards or the diffuser, for example, which is much more tied to the sort of the central flow down the middle of the car.
And Toto Wolff said it'd take Mercedes 4 months to do it, so we think that's 2 in real terms.
Yeah, I think I've perhaps been pulled in a little bit by Toto Wolff's words there, and that if Mercedes decided that was the right way to go, they'd have to change the whole design of their car.
Sandbagging with development times.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think, you always have to take anything Toto Wolff says with a big piece, or particularly on the technical things. Yeah, I mean, I think if a team wanted to do it, they could do it a lot quicker. And the benefit now is, you can get the CFD and the wind tunnel work done, but then you then have this massive lead time. If you think of the old front wings and the hundreds of components that they consisted of, the new front wings are much simpler to produce, which means they're much cheaper. So if Force India, for example, wanted to change to that style of front wing, once they've done the CFD and the aero work, then the manufacturing department could do it much quicker because there's less to make.
Yeah.
And it would be much cheaper. Therefore, the team would be much more tempted to go down that route. So, I think the 4-month thing, I think, is stretching it, but I think it could be done relatively quickly if a team thought that they would find a lot of performance in it. But, with all of these sort of things, it's a bit horses for courses. If a team has worked through their development over the winter with a full width front wing, should we call it, like, the conventional style, then they probably won't find a huge amount of performance just by immediately changing to the Sauber one, because it's just moving the airflow in slightly different ways. And there's other aspects of the car's design that I think could be a bit more influential to sort of spend the time on.
Yeah, something tells me that by the time we get to Europe, we're going to be seeing some new designs on a Friday morning, and then not seeing them again by Friday afternoon.
Yeah, I mean, I think the teams have got a lot to throw at the cars this year. They've lost a lot of performance from the front wing changes, and it means that all of the influence is going to go onto barge boards, turning vanes, and the stuff around the front of the side pods, and then the edge of the floor. So teams are going to really be throwing huge amounts of effort at little, wings, flaps, flicks, little doodads all along the side of the car to try and get some performance back. That stuff's hard to model, hard to get right. I think you some of the stuff I don't think we'll even notice it's been there because there's just so much on the car now.
Yeah.
I mean, if you sat down and tried to model the B-spec Mercedes and pick out all the different bits and trying to understand where they go and catalogue them, well, by the time you get to Spain, it's like, I can't remember if that bit was there or not. Even with all of us poring over them race by race with the photographs and looking at them in the pit lane, it's going to get really complicated. And unfortunately, with the way the regulation cycle is going, we've now got this season and next season of bargeboard development. And if you look at the Mercedes now, think of where they're going to get in 2 years' time. I mean, it kind of beggars belief. It really does.
I mean, that's one thing I was going to ask you about, because I mean, when we saw the A-spec Mercedes, just the basic vanilla one at the launch, there was a hell of a lot going on around the barge boards in front of the side pods. I think that prompted a sort of 2-hour conversation on our chat group between the four of us.
Yeah, it did. The cars that are launched and the cars that make the first race are seldom the same car, aren't they? So, yeah.
I think that's true. It's true enough. I mean, I think in terms of little add-ons, it's teams, as I said, will race with the initial spec and then update that. I always got a lot of criticism of my analysis of the cars when they're launched. But it will change at Melbourne. It's like, well, yes, but there's bits of the car that don't change. You can't simply change the front suspension geometry or the side prod front geometry, between testing and the first race. And equally, just even seeing some of the testing formats of bodywork tells you a bit about what the teams are thinking about their aero. And obviously that then develops, as you say, I think Melbourne's going to be quite interesting this year. There's going to be a lot of, as I say, kind of barge board and potentially front wing development appearing, because I think a lot of people will have kept some of their clever ideas. There's hopefully some of the stuff that was on my sketch pad, or something, maybe I'm losing my touch that I've had over the winter. There'll be lots of little clever ideas that they'll be putting on the front wings, which are kind of cheeky interpretations of the regulations. And I think the front brake ducts are already an area where teams are, really stretching the wording of the regulations.
Realistically, what changes can teams make from what they learn in testing in time for the first race?
In terms of aero, there's very little they can do because of production timelines. I mean, they can make small changes to some of the modular aspects of the bodywork. So, the front wing end plate would be an area. Potentially, some of the flap elements of the front wing would be an area where it's quite easy to change them relatively quickly. Stick-on bits for barge boards and the front of the side pods is another area where you can get stuff produced relatively quickly. But in terms of, the sort of performance aero stuff, there's not a lot they can really do to react. What they can do is, they'll have a huge job list of little bits and pieces under the skin that they have picked up from testing, things like cooling, vibration, getting access to things. So there'll be a lot of re-engineering under the skin that none of us ever really get to appreciate or know about, that they will, have on the job list, really. But as I say, most of the teams will already have a quite a different set of bodywork signed off for Melbourne anyway. So I think they would be hoping that the delta they saw from their simulations between the old testing package and the Melbourne package will see them right when they get to that place.
So going back to sort of the midfield runners, Haas put in some fairly impressive times during testing. But I can't see anything radically different on the Haas either, going from last year's design to this. Obviously, apart from the paint colours, paint's completely different colour. But the is it just a case of
other energy drinks are available?
Absolutely, yeah. Is it just a case of other evolution appears to be the key here rather than radical design? Because even though there's been regulation changes, nobody's gone for, apart from the Alfa Romeo, which we were just talking about. Nobody's gone for anything like, wow, what is that? People just pointing at things and thinking, this is completely different. That's the only thing I can think of, really, is that front wing. But yet you've got teams who do evolution.
the fins on the top of the nose and chassis on the Scarborough as well
Yeah.
was another. Oh, I forgot that area was there. I think it's an area that people have played with, and I think Merck have got a few bits there as well. Yeah, I mean, I think with the regulations now, it's so much harder to really come out with something that is radically different, because you've got all these boxes, and everyone's been exploiting these same kind of boxes for bodywork for a number of years. So it has to be about evolution. And as you say, the Haas doesn't look outwardly, a very different car to any other one, really. I mean, as I say, you've got this kind of copycat approach for the majority of the aspects of each of the cars' design, with the side pods and the barge boards and that. Haas got slightly different front wing end plate, which was quite interesting, but again, nothing kind of radical. It's like, oh my God, everyone has to copy this. But again, I think, like we saw last year to some extent, Haas are able to kind of kickstart their season because of their approach to how they produce the car. So they spent the winter looking at the aero and doing all their simulations on how to get the suspension working and everything, rather than worrying about having a huge team designing every piece of the car, because they buy big chunks of that in from Ferrari. So, it's a good way to get going quickly for Haas, and it really worked for them last year, even though their operation obviously let them down at some of those first races, in terms of pit stops and driver errors, what have you. But, the problem then comes is later in the year is that there's things that they can't develop because of their, parts being delivered from Ferrari. So they tend to kind of run out of some development through the year. But certainly their performance surprised me in some respects. I mean, at some points they were looking very, very quick. And you look at some of the corrected times. I think Karen Chandok's done some fantastic analysis on the lap times, and Haas are looking really strong. So we would hope that those first flyaway races, they can really get some results in to kind of get their season going, while their obvious rivals were still kind of sorting through every aspect of the car, which is clearly the job that they don't have to do. And then they can work on other areas of the car's aero as the season goes on to try and keep performance in there.
I mean, the thing with Haas with their NASCAR background is they've specialised for several years in making a car that takes corners quickly and sticks to the ground, because that is one of the main aspects of NASCAR. And I'm pretty sure they've carried a lot of that sort of ethos over into the way they've designed the Formula One car. So I did notice their cornering speed seemed to be a lot quicker, and the car looked a lot more stable going through the faster corners. And I don't know if you might have to pull me up if I'm completely off the mark on this, but it just looked like they'd taken some of what they do in NASCAR and sort of replicated it in Formula One, just with the suck the car onto the tarmac side of things.
I'm trying to think if I agree or disagree with that. I mean, I think it's a fair point that they are able to, obviously you say with their NASCAR experience and with the size and shape of team they can work so much more on the setup of the car and how they want the car to work, and get the simulations working for them much more, because they can focus on that much more as a primary objective than other aspects of engineering the car. Historically, they seem to have gone really poorly at high downforce circuits, but that's very much an aero thing. I think it's arguable that they certainly had a grip on the tyres, and they run quite a bit of drag, because they were the team that were really complaining about the fuel levels, and obviously that caught them out towards the end of the year as well. So I guess I think that probably does hold water, that theory. Just goes to show there's different ways you can tackle Formula One within the current regulations. And as much as Haas have their critics, I think that they've been doing a great job, and going into their fourth season now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it'll be interesting to see how much they have matured, because I think last year's performance of the car kind of caught them, with their pants down a little bit. And I think this year, I spoke to Gunther Steiner very briefly at the launch, and he was sort of saying how the team have tried to kind of grow and mature and work out all those little errors that come into an operation when suddenly you have to get that pit stop right because you've got a podium riding on it, and because everybody's looking at you. From both a performance and a legality point of view, and it happens to every team as they go from being a kind of a back marker midfielder to someone towards the front of the midfield, that they're just under that much greater scrutiny and pressure. And I think that's the biggest test for them this year. Perhaps not even the design of the car.
I'm just concerned that I got a fact right to do with NASCAR. do I have to put a quid in the swear jar now I've mentioned it?
Not at all. Not at all. The Renault is another car, Craig, that looks incredibly similar to last year's, but with this year's aero just stuck on to the front and the back of it. Even the car that was testing sort of looked like the launch car, where you would have a 2018 car with 2019 aero stuck onto it. It's very difficult to discern anything from the Renault from last year to this year.
That's interesting, because I think the Renault is quite a deceptive car. Because you're right, at first glimpse it does look, because of the paint job and because of some of the roll hoop sort of styling, it does make it look very similar. It's actually almost a completely different car. This is the step I've been waiting Renault to make for a few years, since they came back into the sport. Because when you actually looked at the car last year, under the skin, you saw loads of bits and pieces that have been on the car for a few years now, and it's like, that's not really kind of cutting edge. And they had the old side pod format and aspects of the suspension and the way they've laid all of the cooling and stuff out. It's, in some respects, I think the Renault is one of the biggest changed cars out there. So sorry if I kind of cut across your comments, but I think
not at all. Not at all.
It's a visual thing, and I agree with you. It took me a little while to kind of read through the Renault before I wrote my analysis of it. And yes, I mean, it looks like a quick car. I mean, they've made a lot of changes, but immediately, it had one lap pace. It seemed to be running very well. I didn't notice any particular reliability issues with the factory car either. And you're hearing the sort of the French side of the Renault operation, the Viry side, saying that they've made a big step with the engine over the winter, which again has always been a bit of a weak point of the commitment of Renault to Formula One over the years, and really putting in some serious hard work into to get that engine up to the spec of Ferrari and Mercedes. And again, I still don't think they're there yet, but I think we're now starting to see they're underlining the work they're doing is there's that commitment now to try and get up to the very top performance of the sport. And I mean, I think the Renault Haas battle could be really interesting, because they really had the kind of the knives out for each other at the back end of last year, and I can't see that going away, which should be fascinating. I think it'll be interesting to see which teams are really there to kind of join them as the obvious favourites in that area. But again, we've all had a soft spot for the Enstone team over its various guises over the years, and again, it's nice to see them now kind of really securing that sort of spot at the front of the midfield, and hopefully nipping at the heels of the top three as well.
I mean, I'm guessing from a sort of particular Renault point of view, they're going to want to try and get one over on Red Bull, just because of where Red Bull have gone now,
and where Danny Ricciardo
where Danny Ricciardo's gone as well.
I think that will be interesting. I wonder how vocal that kind of competitive edge between them will become. But you could see the situation if certainly if the Renault chassis and package end up being really good, and the Red Bull coping with perhaps the tyre changes, the aero reg changes, or even the Honda power unit not being as reliable or up to par as we think it may be, then Renault could get very close in the championship. Certainly one of their drivers could up one of the Red Bull drivers in the championship. That's entirely possible. So close and so finely balanced is the length of the championship this year. So I think that'd be quite interesting, and I'd love to see Christian Horner start to bitch quite early in the season about they've done something we didn't like about them.
It's illegal, it's illegal, something's wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah,
They never gave us an engine like that when we were their customer. Yeah, there's going to be, there could be some interesting needle there. I hadn't actually thought of it in that respect, but I think they could be quite fun.
Yeah, Red Bull launching new flavour sort of round about end of the summer break, sour grape. While we're on the subject of sort of aero changes, the rear wing has had a massive change this year with the new DRS slot. It looks vast. That's the only way to describe it.
It does. I mean, the rear wing looks enormous and quite at odds with, I think, what you should be doing potentially with Formula One cars. But I think the DRS effect is going to be much greater this year, and that really depends on what the FIA do with the DRS zones around the circuits. Because the problem we had is a couple of races last year, and I can't remember which ones they are now, so I apologise, but the straights weren't long enough for DRS to have a clear effect that you can get alongside by the braking zone. And that's all DRS is trying to do. DRS isn't actually trying to get you to overtake the other car, but merely get alongside before you both hit the brakes. And then, the FIA, as much as a lot of people are quite critical of the FIA, the technical team do a lot of work to try and predict the DRS effect at each circuit and how long the DRS zone should be and where they should be on the track. And hopefully with this more powerful DRS effect that you'll have with this huge rear wing with a huge gap that suddenly opens up in it, should mean that we get a bit more balance of sort of DRS passing throughout the year, rather than just at tracks that have got a huge long straight or back-to-back straights where you can double up DRS. So we'll wait to see. But it does then mean that the teams can then start to play a bit more with setup. And we saw this, I'm trying to remember which race it was. I think it might have been Baku, where for the first time they had a double DRS zone. And teams were then thinking, well, if we've got DRS on two parts of the straight, then we're just going to slap on huge amounts of downforce and just wait to use DRS for overtaking, which then just means that the whole thing becomes really complicated and it screws up the tyre strategy as well, and everyone really struggles to overtake the rest of the time. So I'm hoping they've got the maths right on that one. But, I like most people, I remain no big fan of DRS, and certainly of its unlimited use, through the race and through the weekend.
Yeah, it's still got the sort of air of artificialness about it in a lot of cases.
I think the point is that if you've got someone hunting down another driver towards the end of the race, and you think, well, this guy should be able to hold this other bloke off, but when you get a big DRS effect, it just becomes a null point at the end, doesn't it? You just know that car is going to just swoop past the other one. And they can have as many laps at trying that as they want until basically the race finishes. So, again, I think the unlimited aspect of DRS, rather than its maybe more strategic use of it, would be more interesting. You only get like 10 uses of it during the race or over the race weekend or something. And when it's gone, it's gone. And I think that seems a slightly better way of doing things, rather than just sitting behind someone for lap after lap until eventually you get everything hooked up and you overtake someone with DRS.
Well,
which doesn't seem now.
It seemed to work well in GP3 for the last couple of years because they only get a limited amount during each race, and it was more calculated when it was being used, and it would be good to see Formula One bring that in.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know why that. It seems to be a fairly simple regulation to bring in, but it never seems to get debated. So it's just one of those things within the great scheme of things that Formula One doesn't want to change.
Sounds about right. Back to specific cars now. What are your thoughts on this year's McLaren? Because we touched on it briefly, but we always end up talking about McLaren a lot on this podcast for some unknown reason.
I think there needs to be a bit of balance when talking about the McLaren. They've obviously had a number of terrible years, and I think last year was a really bad year for them because they couldn't use the engine as its sole excuse for performance. And I think that really kind of heightened the problems.
There's no red to hide.
No. But this year, in design terms, which is, when we first see the car test launched, it's like, yes, okay, they've put a lot more thought into this car. And we know there were some fundamental issues with the car last year that they couldn't simply change. So again, it looks like a very well thought through car. It seems to have everything that you would want on it. And the Renault is improving. So that was kind of heartening. And then we got to testing, and they were, they had a pretty good test, didn't they? They had some pace. I don't think they're at the sharp end of the midfield, but equally they're not languishing at the back with, fundamental problems with the power unit or with the handling. So I think hopefully this is, the first step back to McLaren to, being a sort of competitive midfielder, but not necessarily, the team that are going to be pushing at the heels of Red Bull through the year. But, there is that potential there. And I think for the first time, we're maybe starting to see the technical operation at Red Bull start to stabilise a little bit, because that has been somewhat ragged over the past few years. We've got Andreas Seidel from the Porsche LMP1 team, who would be a superb person to have running the operation there. We know James Key is going to come in there. I'm not quite sure their job titles now.
James Key's a technical director, isn't he? I think when he starts. Just interestingly enough, he starts just after the first race.
Yes, that is often the case with these contracts. It's like, we'll get testing the first race out of the way, then you're free, because by then it's kind of too late. Everything's out anyway.
Yeah.
But James Key is one of those people that, I've seen at all the teams he's gone to, that he's very quick to understand where the priorities are, what the targets for everyone should be. He's not a designer in the Adrian Newey mold. He's not going to be sitting there, drawing bits and pieces. He's going to be the one saying, well, the aim and the objective for your department in suspension is to, X, Y, and Z, and the aero team is to get the sensitivity to this level, the downforce to this level. So he's very good at kind of getting that done in a very calm and considered way, which I think will work very well at McLaren, because, it's a very much a very thoughtful, I wouldn't call it laid back, but it's a very quiet scientific kind of place. And I think James Key worked very well, because it's very much his kind of style of management. So, again, things are starting to look a bit better for McLaren. But, that's always with the usual caveats that, it could all go desperately wrong, or maybe, this is, just the start of a much bigger step that they'll, as we know, McLaren historically have always had great in-season development. If they start midfield, the middle of the midfield, then by year end, could they be pushing towards the front of the midfield? That's plausible as well. So I think it's going to be probably more interesting than normal to watch McLaren this year, rather than the kind of the flawed team that we've seen over the past few seasons.
I think it's kind of the first year of Zach Brown's 10-year plan, isn't it? Because he said it would take them up to that long to be competitive again. Yeah.
Is it really?
It's
been in charge then.
That's what I was going to say.
It's taken 3 years to do a
3 years
plan.
and then say this is the first year of my plan.
I've got a plan that I'm going to put into place in 3 years from now.
Yeah, the last 3 years have been pre-planning the plan.
Oh, right, got you.
Yes.
Strategy meetings and steering groups and symposiums.
Yeah. I mean,
And Alonso.
I am still sceptical of some aspects of the McLaren operation. But I think on the technical side, I think that maybe is starting to bed down a little bit now. And let's hope that, these new heads coming in don't, create any interruption to the progress that they have been making over the winter without them. But again, I don't think that they're the personalities that would kind of be rocking the boat in that respect.
If you'd listened to the show, I think it was 3 weeks ago, last time we were around here, when I had my 5-minute rant on the state of them and what they're doing and where they're going wrong people-wise. I think I got told to calm down at the end of it.
That sounds about right.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so.
Sorry, Chris, you looked like you were about to say something.
I was going to say, I know we quickly touched on the Williams sort of languishing around at the back a little bit. Is there anything you've seen on the car, Craig, or anything in the design of the car that you've, in the very short time it was actually on the circuit, where you thought, oh, hang on a second, that's a little bit primitive in comparison to what the other teams are up to?
I mean, I've got probably a little bit of humble pie to eat in some respects, because when they released the first renderings, which is when I sort of did my first analysis of all of the cars, the car looked pretty unexciting, to be honest. But when we saw the actual car, and normally the renderings that teams release at launch have got, there's certain structural elements which are quite accurate, because these are all based off of the CAD of the car, and they just simplify and hide bits and pieces. But the Williams one was actually a bit more of a smokescreen than they would normally be. And when I start to look at aspects of the front suspension, of the barge boards, of the other sort of features downstream of the car, actually you look at the Williams and think, oh wow, actually that's quite clever. They've really kind of taken another step here, which is very much what I said about the car when I saw it last season. It's like, well, actually, it looks like it's a big step forwards. They've made lots of changes. It's lots of things that other people are doing. They're not upsetting the apple cart, but they're going with known good solutions and very clever interpretations of them. So, I mean, if you painted that Williams white, and I mean, it would be difficult just not to put that blue on it. I think it might be easier to say. And you looked at that and you think, oh, actually, that's a really good car. So there's nothing on it that would be a red flag to say, well, that's a risk. That's not a good idea. Or, they just really haven't pushed very hard on this one. I think they have pushed very hard. But again, as I say, they did that last year, and it sometimes, again, it's the visual thing. You can see that they've made lots of changes, but it's the actual detail implementation of them that was the problem. And that was the issue for them last year with the front wing and how it affected the floor and how the undercut and the side pods was working the rest of the car. So you would hope that Williams have learnt the lessons from last year, that they've got that kind of correlation aspect of the car design right, and all of these new features on the car that they've put on for this year will work as they expected them to. But they were running that car in testing, and it was way off the pace, even from their nearest rivals, which is a worry, even with a very late start to the year for them. So again, you sit there slightly scratching your head. They've got the Mercedes powertrain there. They've got Paddy Lowe. They've got a huge engineering operation, a very successful engineering consultancy. They've got a car that clearly looks like it's got the right bits on it. Where the hell is it going wrong?
Yeah, yeah.
I can't put my finger on it, and hopefully someone in Williams can put their finger on it and rectify that.
I mean, Kubica was saying this week that he's concerned about the reliability because over the whole of testing, he didn't get a longer running than 15 laps.
Yeah,
and that's kind of disconcerting. They're gonna have to do a lot of long runs in 3 practice sessions in Australia just to effectively have another shakedown for it. From the sounds of what he was saying,
I think Australia is going to be a baptism of fire, and I think there was some talk I noticed on social media today about what the potential weather may be out there, which may not be all dry. And I know we've had lots of wet sessions in Melbourne in the past, which would be really bad for Williams for their first race. Yeah, and again, you kind of wonder where the reliability is, because they've run that engine package since 2014. The Mercedes is a reliable unit. Where are these problems creeping in? They should be really mature in that aspect of the car design, and they should just be able to just go out, even if they're slower, just bang in race distance after race distance. It just wasn't happening for them, was it? And I don't know. Again, I don't entirely understand where the problem lies.
It's going to be an interesting one to find out in a couple of weeks. I don't think we've mentioned Racing Force India Point Racing.
Yeah, because we can't remember what they're called.
Yeah. I don't think we've talked about them too much, apart from the names.
yeah.
Yeah, they're an interesting one this year, aren't they? I mean, we had it was around Silverstone last year that we had the change of ownership, where the Strolls, where they went into receivership or administration, I've got to get the term right, and the Strolls then kind of somehow snuck in above everyone else trying to buy Force India and bought them. And there was this sort of shake-up with Otmar Zafnauer sort of taking the lead of the team very much over Vijay. And there was all this talk about we're going to invest huge amounts of money and we're going to get everything right. And they had a pretty good end to the season when they had that big aero update, which the car was clearly desperately needing. And I think if you added all of their points up, they had ended up having a pretty good year again.
I think they would have come fourth with both sets of points.
Yeah, I think
altogether.
they were. Yeah.
I can't remember. It's been a while since I looked at the maths, but they would have been there or thereabouts, certainly. And I think their race performances showed that as well. But when they unveiled the car, it was quite confusing that Andy Green, their technical director, said, well, this is the 2018 chassis, the 2018 tub, that we've modified to put a different side pod and front suspension on. And then I scratch my head and think, well, hold on, if they've had this money since Silverstone last year, why are they running an old tub? Now, there's lots of money saving and technical reasons why that wouldn't necessarily be a problem. But again, just makes me a bit confused as to what the hell is going on in a team that we've, for years said if only they had the investment and the money to run a team, and do the development through the year. And finally, I think we've got to a stage where we've got people that are throwing money at the team, but the first car is a kind of a B-spec Force India. So I am confused. That said, the car they've produced, apart from the colour scheme, which I think looks...
It's the worst I've seen in years.
It's very patchy, and it reminds me of the old days of pre-qualifying teams, where any sponsor, you'll find space on the car for you.
Second Andrea Moda reference this week.
Yes. But when you actually look at the car, okay, lots of the aero is just carryover stuff just to get them through testing. There'll be a big package at Melbourne and another big package very soon after. But what they've done is they've changed a couple of very big aspects of the car. So the front suspension, they've copied what Mercedes and Toro Rosso have done for the past few years and actually raised the front wishbones up to the point where the top wishbone doesn't actually go into the wheel to meet the upright. The upright has to curve out of the wheel and the brake duct and come alongside the tyre sidewall in order to meet the top wishbone. This is an aerodynamic thing to get the wishbones higher up so that the front wing upwash doesn't hit the wishbones.
Right.
And they've done that, which, the front of the car basically is all about the loads that the suspension's going into. And they've changed that, but using the old tub. How do they do that? I mean, that's some amazing patching work that they've done there. And then further back down the car, the Ferrari side pod style that they wanted to introduce last year but couldn't do because they only had the resources to re-engineer the monocoque to put the halo in, which puts huge loads into the chassis during that load testing. But again, they've changed to these Ferrari-style side pods, which means the side crash structures had to be changed. And again, they've done that, which is a structural change to the monocoque, which they've done by modifying the 2018 monocoque. And they've had to re-crash test all of this, obviously, to make it legal. And it's clearly passed them because the car was testing. But they've done all that work on an old tub. And it's like, well, you guys are really clever. I mean, this really, there's no team on the grid that knows how to, do stuff on a budget, quickly, get it done, get the car racing than the Silverstone-based team, Force India, Racing Point, Jordan, Midland, Spike, or whatever else. I mean, we call the Renault the Enstone team, and it gets a bit confusing if you called them the Silverstone team because it doesn't seem unique enough for them. But they really do, and I'm hoping that the investment that they are hopefully getting, I mean, I presume they're getting from the Strolls and all of this Sport Pacer money and everyone else that's sponsoring them. I noticed that the engine's badged as a BWT Mercedes, which is quite interesting. That means that the team can really develop through the year and, honestly get back that fourth position in the championship. But I think with the momentum of Haas and Renault, I think it's going to be quite hard for them this year. I don't think it's beyond them, but I think everything has to go their way. They have to get their race results in. And, that does kind of raise the spectre of drivers and also to an extent tyre strategy, which are kind of the the big thing for Force India is they've always been very good with their tyre strategies. So yeah, if they're going to want to get fourth in constructors, then Stroll is going to have to be getting those race finishes in every race, as high up as Perez is able to, and I think it's a test of his maturity, really, isn't it?
I think we've seen he's not a great tyre manager either. He seems to have that problem switching some of the tyres on. Will that
or
be
he wasn't in the Williams?
Not in the Williams. He wasn't, definitely not. Will that be something that affects him a lot this year with these new Pirelli compounds?
I mean, it could do. We know that the old Force India Perez trick is to go really easy on your tyres, really eke them out, especially on the either running softer or harder and just running the life out of them. It's been very much something that's brought their results, and it's very much something that Perez had a particular skill at. Ocon had a slightly different sort of race strategy, which is why we often saw the drivers crossing over or crossing into each other.
Yeah.
Over recent seasons. So I don't quite know where Stroll will kind of fit into that. But I wonder if maybe the Force India race engineering setup may just be slightly better for him to work within. And maybe he'll get a bit more coaching and a bit more, because the team are kind of on top of this whole situation. And I think Williams always struggled a bit understanding the tyres. It's been a weak point of theirs, even going back to sort of 2014, one of their better years. You would come out of a test session, you'd go and chat to Rob Smedley or someone from the team, and they go, yeah, tyres didn't really work as we expected them. We've got to go and have a look at some analysis at that. Whereas Force India have just always seemed on top of the tyres, which is probably why they've had such great results over recent seasons. So if Stroll can inherit some of that wisdom and some of those strategies, then maybe he can start to put in those race results that we've seen him. He has put a few good results in over his time at Williams, despite all of the challenges that they've had. So we'll give the guy a break, and maybe it may work out better for him at Racing Point.
Yes.
Yeah, I think he's got, when it comes to time management, he's got a lot to learn from Perez, who could be one of the best teachers for him.
I think he could, and I think Perez was making lots of noise about moving on to other teams last year. I think it's one of those odd situations, a bit like Vettel and the exhaust blown Red Bulls. It's just the right driver in the right team with the right strategy. It just all kind of comes together. I think if he went to another team, a bit like he did with his sojourn at McLaren, it may not gel as well as it has done with him with that team over the years.
I mean, another thing to look out for Force Racing Point, I'm giving up trying to pin one name on them, is, I mean, obviously they've got the new investment in, but they haven't got the new facilities and the new staff yet, fully. And I think that's when we're going to see the big changes. And that's the bit I'm looking forward to with that team, when they've actually got the infrastructure to make the step up. And you say, they've done what they've done this year with last year's car and managed to turn it round on a shoestring. And at the moment, I think they're still having to do that in that way because they don't have the bodies to do it, and they don't have the buildings to put the bodies in.
No, I mean, I think it will be very much a kind of a two-stage fight back, really. I think you will have, yes, they've got more money right now if you need it. So if they want that front wing, they can say, right, you need this cash. We will, get contractors in to do the design work and the aero work. We will farm out the composite and the machining production to third parties. They can, if they've got the money, do some things much quicker than they could before. But the full solution would be to have the bigger factory with, the bigger facilities, and everyone's always on hand, which is the better way, obviously, of developing a car. But, I think we could see, the fruits of that through this year by seeing, the kind of the pace of their development. Hopefully we'll be seeing lots more bits going on that car through the year than we have struggled to see over recent years.
Yeah, I think the midfield is looking particularly good this year, just with the steps that everyone's made and we're hoping can make. Chris, you were mentioning earlier something about mirrors. I seem to remember.
Yeah, I've spotted on a couple of cars. I don't know. it looks like, and I might be wrong, it looks like the new way of mounting the mirrors, sort of a lot of the teams, if not all of them, are now mounting them sort of just on the side pod with an arm going back to the cockpit, but mounted pretty much on the side pods. But there's a couple of teams look like they've got like almost like winglets, like vents almost in the mirrors. Are they legal? Do they not count as winglets, which would technically be illegal?
This is a really grey area. So the regulations did change over the winter. That moved the mirrors further outboard. They also raised the rear wing upwards so that the drivers could get a better rear view from behind or of behind. And that's all good stuff because they actually did some testing and practice with that, as we saw with, I think, Vettel with the Ferrari. I think Hamilton as well did some stuff with mirrors. So you've got the rear view bit. And they've also tried to clamp down on the ridiculous situation that grew up last year where teams were having 3 or 4 different mountings for the mirror. And these mountings had nothing to do with the structural load that huge mirror pod exerts upon the racing car. But they're obviously all about, we're going to make the excuse to put some aerodynamic bodywork and we'll just call it a wing mirror mount. So the FIA sort of stepped in over the winter and said, okay, you can only have 2 mirror mounts. One can go on the inner lower side and one can go underneath the mirror, which is kind of where you mount the mirror anyway.
Yeah.
So the obvious approach, as you said, most of the cars have the one that mounts towards the cockpit is a big flat fin, which has its own aerodynamic purpose. And then the vertical one under the mirror then again has a small aerodynamic purpose. But then you have people playing with what Ferrari were doing last year. Ferrari launched their car last year with these ducted mirrors, where you have a hole in front of them. So what you end up having is a mirror. If you think of what you would consider the mirror pod, that kind of wedge-shaped bit that the mirror attaches to, you've kind of got one of them within another one of them. And this is where the rules start to get quite grey. And that then mounts all together, and that has a great aerodynamic function to reduce drag and help you direct the airflow a little bit better. And I think some of the teams that have gone this way Renault and Toro Rosso have gone for a fairly straightforward approach. Williams have got a really odd approach that I haven't quite worked out. I've not had a close enough look at it yet. And Red Bull have gone really quite radical with describing this pod outside of the normal mirror pod. But if you look at the regulations, it says, well, the mirror pod, the mirror bit that there, has to be mounted from side and below. But when you look at these ducted setups, the inner mirror pod is mounted sometimes with 3 or 4 separate mounts above and below it. So I reckon if you were a team without that design and you got to Melbourne, I'd go and have a word with Charlie and go, that mirror has got 4 mountings and it's got extraneous bodywork. I'm trying to remember. There's a term, I forget the wording in the rules, but it's something along the lines of, the mounts must be minimal. So you could actually say that the pod around the pod on the Red Bull, the Williams and that is actually not minimal mounting. It's actually something else. So again, depending on what clarifications the FIA have sent out, and sadly we don't get to see any copies of those, I reckon you could have a pretty strong case to actually protest them at Melbourne and just upset one of your neighbours, just for the hell of it.
No team would do that, surely.
Yeah, they would.
It's all good fun, but I think it's one of these things. It would be a bit of a storm in a teacup. There's not massive amounts of performance in this. It's a very big visual thing. They could change them. They've probably got spares ready for this already in case there is any issue, but they could quite easily modify the mirror quite quickly and race without them. So we'll see. But it's odd that there is such a variation in something as what's supposed to be mundane and benign as just a rear view mirror. But I guess that's Formula One for you.
It is, yeah.
If you can gain an advantage from it, do it.
And the other thing that I spotted, I think it was on the Toro Rosso, and there's another car that's got it as well, and I can't remember what the other car is. But everybody's gone for the high-mounted side pods, but I've noticed the Toro Rosso has like an under the side pod, like another inlet, like a really small, like close to the body inlet.
Yeah,
Is that an aerodynamic thing or?
Yeah, I think all that is the smaller inlet lower down is just for the electronics within the side pods. It's not going down to the radiators and stuff, and that's
Right.
just a little
Okay.
bit. It's just a little bit of packaging. It's not a performance thing. It's like, well, we've got to have this much inlet area to cool the radiators. We do this much to go down to the ECU and the power boxes and the ERS boxes that are inside the side pods. So yeah, they just mount that in a slightly different position. Because I think I'm pretty sure it was the Scarborough had quite a big one, and at first I was a bit confused as to what was going on until again we had some slightly better pictures.
Yeah, I think that's the other car, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, but as you say, that high side pod design has been adopted by everybody now, apart from Mercedes, rather oddly, despite changing their last year to try and make their one look like the Ferrari side pod, but not actually changing the structure inside.
And of course, Sean, you saw a big air resistance, well, possibly an air resistance thing in the Force India Lollipop with the holes drilled in it.
Yeah, that seemed a really strange one. There were some pictures of the pink car doing a practice pit stop, and their Lollipop this year, for some reason, they appear to have like aero holes in that. I'm not quite sure what they're going for there.
I haven't seen it.
They're very deliberate and very uniform and in a very symmetrical pattern. I don't know whether it's just an aesthetic thing, but it seems an odd choice.
I guess it could be weight saving. It could, for when the guy pulls it out of the way, that it has less air resistance. I don't. You see teams play about with stuff like that around the pits quite a lot. Lots of the teams last year were playing with lollipops that actually had their own hinge mounting, a bit like you have on the exit of a car park. But although it was manually operated, which seemed really Formula One, it's like, why would you do that? I mean, I guess if there's holes in it, all it may be is just that maybe the driver get a bit of a view through it or something, so that they can see if there's a kind of leaving the pits from. I don't know. It seems a bit odd.
Yeah, it does seem odd.
I'll send you a link to the photo because it's a tough.
I'll have to have a look at that. Yeah.
Or maybe that's it. They're hoping everyone's going to be looking at it going, oh, what's that? Do we need to be spending our time doing something about that?
Yeah. Just imagine someone like Arriva Bene last year would have been shouting at the Ferrari factory, drill some holes in it. We must have holes. Everyone else has got holes in their lollipop.
Like the Adrian Newey technique of sticking all the engineers on the grid around the back of the car so everyone concentrates on that without seeing all the developments they've made on the front.
Some of us have walked through that one. We've learnt that now.
Yeah.
If all the engineers are at the back, that means I can get more pictures at the front. So
We'll be seeing a lot more grid security this year, especially around the side pods.
well, I mean, unfortunately, we may find the grid's a bit empty this year because there's so few TV companies covering things live, isn't there? Or with the budget to have people and camera crews wandering around the paddock and the pit lane and the grid, which is a bit of a worry for all of us.
Yeah, I mean the audiences are declining. Of course, in the UK, we're behind the Sky paywall now.
Yeah.
And is it time for Formula One to maybe look back at some of the deals that Bernie's made and go, actually, hang on a second, we'd rather have eyes on the sport than subscription fees, which are dropping every year?
Well, exactly. I mean, I think this may well be one of the things that Liberty have kind of run into, and was throughout the last few years of Bernie's era, there was always the question is, someone's going to come in and take over. And lots of people wanted to buy the sport, but how many of them have actually stopped and looked at all of those deals that are in a filing cabinet somewhere? It's going to take a long time to unpick them, and it's a huge job to actually change the financial model for Formula One, and I don't think Liberty are making very quick moves to kind of do that, because you can't. If you want a fan-based sport, you can't get people to pay for it through pay TV or subscription web services, or from paying £100 for a ticket to go to the event. It's the money has to come from somewhere else, and I don't know what Liberty's plan for that is, but it needs to come sooner rather than later, because nothing will kill a sport quicker if you haven't got eyes on it, and I think it could be quite drastic this year. In the UK, and I don't know what it's been like in other countries. I know that some of the coverage comes and goes a little bit.
Yeah.
See just how much it drops, because I know the viewing figures for Sky F1 and for some of their specific shows are incredibly low.
Yeah.
That is really worrying, because that would reduce Formula One to, a real backwater of a sport, which really isn't where it should be in its kind of natural home, which is the UK and Europe.
Yeah, and especially with what now appears to be 6 races under threat for next season, with Mexico having missed the date for the 2020 provisional calendar reserve date. I can't remember the exact wording, but it looks like that may not be happening. And then, of course, the 5 circuits whose contracts run out this year. So, yeah.
Well, exactly, and all of them will be going into negotiations saying, look, we simply can't afford to spend all of this money to have these ticket prices to operate a Formula One event. You're the rights holder. You should be giving us some money to host the event. It shouldn't be the other way around. But, Liberty and Formula One as a commercial operation needs to have the money to do this somewhere, and I don't know where the rest of this cash is coming from. It's very much outside my field of knowledge, but even with my simplistic understanding of this situation, it's clear that something has to be done, or else we will forever be, losing the classic races and taking it off to countries where the government will want to invest to have Formula One seen to be in their country. For the few years that they have an interest in doing that, and then obviously they then drop out, and you have the situation as we've had so often over this past decade of, do you remember when we used to race in this country? And do you remember the dreadful races we used to have in this country?
South Korea,
India.
Well, I won't mention any specific countries, but that's not the way. There needs to be a balance. We need to have the classic races, but equally we do need to be going to some new territories and trying different things. But it can't go too much towards new circuits at the expense of, some of the classic European and US races.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'd rather see a race around Monza than around a new city centre street circuit.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, to be honest, I don't mind street circuits. I think Formula One needs to have a few of them in the calendar, because a lot of the races are the ones that are just kind of so dull, and the Tilkedromes equally. I think we need a couple of really fast racetracks out there. If I had the budget to go and build a circuit somewhere, I would have some kind of Super Monza, Paul Ricard. It's 230 on the straights and very little else in between kind of racing. Because I think that is another aspect of Formula One that's kind of been lost with the the sort of safety chicanes that we had during the 80s and 90s, and emasculated some of the classic circuits, because you can't start chopping down trees and forests and things around a classic venue.
Craig, you seem to have disappeared.
Oh.
Ah,
you still there?
Yeah,
Hello?
Yeah,
Yes, we're still here.
Yeah, you disappeared for a second.
Oh, oh no! I thought it was you guys queuing up next one.
The joys of Skype.
Oh, yes.
In fact, that's probably our systems telling us that we've taken up quite enough of your time.
A considerable chunk of your evening, Craig.
Yes, thank you very much for that. Where can we find you online this season? Because you have videos to share.
Yes. This year it's a bit of a moving target a bit this year. So the main place to keep an eye on for me is on Twitter at Scarbs Tech. But I'm also doing work with motorsport.tech, which is the Acronis-sponsored technical portal, which is quite interesting.
Nice.
I'm doing some stuff with racefans.net, the big independent motorsport website, and still doing stuff with Peter Windsor as ever on YouTube, on the Racer's Edge, and a few other little things that are bubbling up as well. So, as I say, I think follow me on Twitter, and that'll be the key place where I'll let you know with where bits and pieces are appearing.
That's good, and hopefully 1 or 2 more appearances on this podcast as well.
Definitely, yeah. I'd look forward to it, and hopefully I'll get up to a few more races this year. My first one this year is going to be Bahrain, so I'm quite looking forward to that, because I'm hoping for a very, very deserted pit lane and lots of cars lying unattended for my camera to go up around.
We'll have a look for the photos as soon as you get them. That's great. Thanks so much for joining us, Craig.
Thanks very much again, guys.
Thanks. We'll see you
Thanks.
soon.
Thanks, Craig.
Thank you, Craig.
Always great to have Craig on the show.
Always.
Yeah.
He knows so much.
So much more than us.
That's not hard, but he really does know a hell of a lot more than us. Time to see how much you three know.
Not very
no.
much.
I've got a shunt in front of me.
Okay.
I want to thank Lucas Niven for sending this one through.
Thank you, Lucas.
Lucas?
Thank you.
Who listened to my appeal the other week to send me total shunts for weeks when Lee can't make it and forgets to forward them on to me,
Which was this week.
which was this week.
Despite Lee's
so,
protestations that he never forgets to forward them on.
so if you want to send an emergency total shunt for when Lee's not here, send it to 3legs4wheels@gmail.com and I will put it on the list,
Yes.
like I did with this one from Lucas. You ready?
Yeah.
I was born
Good stuff.
Correct.
in 1976.
So 43
40,
this
43
year.
this year.
Yes.
Yes. Good.
Second clue. My wife won Supermodel of the World in 1997 at aged 14.
What?
So, in what year, sorry?
1997.
Okay.
Aged 14. So she was born 83, 82,
Supermodel
83.
of the World is an amazing title.
Yeah.
Aged 14, though. Come on.
Supermodel Junior.
Yeah.
Third clue. Between 1998 and 2001, I raced in all 4 editions of the Macau Grand Prix and the French F3 Championship, becoming 2-time runner-up in the latter. So the French F3.
So do we assume it is a French?
Or a Macawian.
The well-known Macawians.
And I will need a guess off you on this one.
French drivers, if they make it to Formula One, roughly mid 2000s, then someone like Frank Montagny.
Does he have hot wife? Do we know?
No idea. No idea. His hot wife was 14 in 1997.
We don't know how it's gone for
Exactly.
us since then.
No. No, it's a bit of a strange thing to put in that, yeah.
I was blonde in 1997.
Well, so was I, but I still am now. So
Yeah,
what are
I'm
you gonna
not.
do?
I can't remember 1997.
If you can remember it, you weren't there.
Should we go with your Montagny?
Franck Montagny.
Okay, that is your first guess.
Unless Dan's got a better one.
No.
No, that'll do for now.
That
then.
is your first guess. Clue 4. I was leading a world championship in 2017 until a crash in a test left me with serious injuries and ended my season.
A world championship.
A world championship.
All right, so 2017.
And I'm just trying to stop a cat from jumping
Yes.
up onto a table that's got all the technology on it that's very precariously balanced.
2 years ago.
2 years ago. There was what the fuck's his name? There was a guy in, I think it was like GT, who he had a crash and he got like a mega concussion and he was out for months and I can't remember his name. But he'd be about the right kind of age.
I'm not aware of this gentleman.
No, but like properly like really bad concussion.
Next clue.
Yep.
I manage a current Formula E driver.
Don't know who manages the
No,
drivers.
aside from when Nico Rosberg announces that he's managing people, I don't really follow
Yes,
the
but
managers.
he wasn't born in 1976.
He was not, no.
That pause was brought to you by my vape. Next clue, and I will need a guess after this one. I was in Formula One with 3 iterations of the same team, but only raced for 2 of them.
So,
I mean,
test
The-
driver or someone who ended up owning a team.
Or somebody who was part of the Midland Spiker
Jordan.
Jordan thing. Someone like Christian Albers. I think he was part of Midland and Spiker, wasn't he?
possibly. I'm not a great authority on Christian Albers.
And possibly a test driver when they were still Jordan, maybe.
So,
But
can
he's
we have a
Dutch,
guess?
isn't he, Christian Albers? I would
I
have
think
thought.
he is Dutch.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean he wouldn't have competed in.
In French,
We've assumed
F3.
French because French F3, but I mean British F3 have been announcing their drivers this week, and they're from all over the place. So
Yeah, yeah.
And they have a
does-
race in Spa.
they do have a race. I think most of them have an international race. Most of that lot. Albers?
I-
Why
Christian
not
Albers? Yeah, Christian Albers then, yeah.
Okay, second guess Christian Albers. Right. Next clue. A fellow countryman of mine was the reason the safety car was deployed at the start of Imola in 1994.
A fellow countryman of mine.
Start of Imola.
The start of Imola was Pedro Lamy and JJ Leto had a massive accident on the start. Pedro Lamy didn't get away, and I think JJ Leto smashed into the back of him or the other way around.
Yeah, that rings a bell.
And the safety car was brought out.
So what nationalities are we dealing with there?
JJ Leto's Finnish. And Pedro Lamy, I'm not sure. I'm not sure if he is French. I have no idea. It's been Pedro, so... Yeah, I don't know.
Next clue.
Yes.
Okay. I owned a team that competed in GP2 and GP3.
I feel like I know less with every clue.
Yeah.
That's the Dunning-Kruger effect, isn't it?
Yeah.
If you say so.
Yeah, I don't feel like we're zeroing in on
No,
someone.
isn't
at
that
all.
what
Not at
happens
all.
when an ambulance goes past? Is that no? That's
the Doppler effect.
Yeah. Anyway, carry on. Sorry.
Okay, clue number 10. There is a spaffer after this one.
Good.
Go on.
We will need it.
But clue number 10 is I'm a top 10 all-time winner in World Touring Cars. And as I say, there is a spaffer question after this.
Well, as you can see, we're all just
We're
flowing
looking
with the
blank.
ideas on the World
Yeah.
Tour. It could have been
Yeah.
World Touring Cars I was talking about when I meant when I said GT, when I was on about guy who hit his head, whose name still does not come to me.
Hello, Bruno.
So
I have a
I
cat
think
on
this
my
is
lap.
this is one where we're going to end up passing. You'll say the answer, and we're going to go, of course.
well, there is a spaffer.
All going to go, who?
Go on.
My only podium in Formula One was in arguably the most controversial race in history.
Which would
So
be the
2005.
USGP. Yeah. Who was on the podium there?
2 Ferraris and someone else.
Was it? Oh no, I can't remember.
One of the Jordan drivers.
Is it Tiago Montero? Is that his name? Am I thinking of someone else?
Yeah, it might be Thiago Montero.
Might have been him that hit his head.
Yeah, go with Montero.
Yeah.
I am someone else,
Ah.
aka Tiago Montero
Excellent. Is it him that had the concussion?
in World Touring
Yes.
Cars. Yes, I think he now runs the team.
Ah.
Pedro Lamy is Portuguese.
Portuguese.
Yes.
Thiago
As would
Montero
be
is Portuguese.
Yes.
People who are Macauis.
I would have
at
guessed.
that time.
Yeah.
I would have guessed that Thiago Montero would have been Brazilian, if I'm perfectly honest.
No, Tiago Montero is Portuguese, and so is Lucas that sent us the questions.
Thank you very much,
thank
Lucas.
you,
Thank you very
Lucas.
much,
Yeah,
Lucas.
That was a good one.
That got us really, didn't
It
it?
did, yeah. Let's be
Oh,
honest,
yeah.
that's a win for Lucas.
I think under the regulations that's a half point each for getting it on the spaffer. I'm not entirely sure what Lee's new rules are, but they seem to change every week.
Does Lee have rules?
Yeah, apparently.
I was not aware.
He won't-
I
he
thought
won't-
we were just doing.
He won't write them down
whatever.
in case somebody else finds them.
Ah.
If you want to send in a total shunt, the usual way to do it is on a Twitter direct message to @atotalshunt.
That means
But
Lee will get
That
it.
means Lee will get it. But if you want one in reserve for weeks when Lee isn't here, stick it on an email to 3legs4wheels@gmail.com, and I'll be able to hang on to that until.
But don't send them to both because then you'll have the answers.
No, do send them to both. Let's confuse Lee by sending them to both. And then it looks like Paul knows everything from now onwards.
Or we could just get Sean Kelly back, who usually gets it by the word born.
Yeah, I was born. It's Francois Flavert. Okay, yeah, all right, yeah, nice one, yeah.
Right, before we do the final wrap up of the Formula E season, as we're getting very close to the real F1 season, I think we better run a fantasy game.
A real fantasy game.
A real fantasy game,
Or a
rather than
fantasy game where you pick the people who you think are going to do best in the fantasy league.
That's like train spotter spotting.
Yes.
Where when you're on a train and it goes through crew, you lean out the window and take pictures of the people taking pictures of the train. It really winds them up.
I found a blog today that is specifically about predicting what the Rotten Tomato score is going to be of movies before they're released.
Share that link.
I can't remember. I'll try and re-find it. but
Re-find that link.
Similar principle.
But yeah, this year, because they appear to have launched theirs and we've got a league set up, it's going to be on the official Formula One game, which I think is fantasy.formula1.com.
Something like that. It's available on the Formula One official website anyway.
It is. And we've got a link to our league on our website at threelegs4wheels.com under the games section. Join in, see how well you do. I think we're going to be running the prediction league during the season as well, though, aren't we?
On our own site.
On our own,
yeah.
should
for our top threes.
Did anyone see Lando Norris's fantasy Formula One
It
team?
was just him and Sainz.
Yeah, and his chosen team were McLaren.
Of course.
So let's see if we can all band together and beat Lando Norris. Probably not.
No, probably not.
But yeah, get signed up, and apparently F1 are offering prizes this
But
year.
actually, we might do if his team is him and
Yeah, if
Sainz in
that's
a
his
McLaren.
actual lineup and we start going for like Ferrari drivers,
Yeah.
we might beat him.
There is every chance. But yeah, join in with us, and we'll keep it running all the way through the season and see how it goes.
Indeed.
Right, I'll need to get one of the laptops down for this.
Oh, careful. Many wires, many tangles.
Many wires. That's always the joys of Skype shows when we're not at Lee's. Right, Formula Lee. Kind of curtailed winter series due to a lack of podcasts where we only had 4 races because the 2019 season gets launched in about 5 minutes.
Less than that.
Less than that. This one was a lap of Barcelona in the dry in the 1992 Williams, and we have a top 5 of 5th place, Santeri Unasti, new competitor.
That's a good
result.
good name.
126.262. 4th place was Kyle Armstrong, 126.260, so there wasn't a great deal in between them. 3rd place was Alberto Roldan, 126.163.
But I will say 10 seconds off the pace of the real cars.
Yeah, there is that.
Although, no, we're in an old car here.
10 seconds in 27 years.
Yeah.
Chris Albee in 2nd, 125.444. And I suppose it's fitting, Ayrton Antonucci won this race.
Ayrton wins.
125.019. And that means, in the overall standings, the top 3 are Michael J. Keller, Kyle Armstrong, and we sadly haven't got a prize to give away, but Formula E Winter Series winner is Ayrton Antonucci.
Oh, well done, Ayrton.
Well done, Ayrton.
So, congratulations, Ayrton. Can you keep that going from the Winter Championship to the Summer Championship?
I hope so.
See what I did there?
Yes.
So, F1 2018 game.
Sorry, who finished 5th in that?
You're gonna make me say that. You're gonna make me say that again.
Yeah.
Santeri Unasti.
Okay.
This is because you came round this afternoon during the NFL Combine. And
I
we've
did,
been taking
yes.
the piss out of names all
Yeah.
day.
Yeah. Yeah. The NFL Combine, some interesting names. Santeri has an interesting name. I like it. It's a good name.
It's a solid name.
He's got potential to be at least a defensive back for the Redskins. I've probably really offended him as an Eagles fan.
Oh dear.
I'm now going to get a tweet from him saying, actually, if you support the Patriots, don't bother. But Formula E 2019 full season.
So we're starting in Australia.
We're starting in Australia. We're going to start it in the dry.
Yay.
And we're going to start with a Mercedes. Because we might as well start it with the fastest car and then it all goes downhill.
Fastest car in the game.
Fastest car in the game. You have 2 weeks to get your time in. which would be Monday the 18th, which is the Monday after the Australian Grand Prix. Send it to us. You can either stick it in an email, 3legs4wheels@gmail.com, send it on a Twitter private message at 3legs4wheels, go to our Facebook page, facebook.com/3legs4wheels, send a screenshot and a private message, or send me a friend request if you already haven't on PlayStation. I am Pabstar, and I'll be able to see your time from the game.
Yep.
If you want to get in touch with us, you've got most of the addresses, but if you want to get in touch with us individually on Twitter, you can get us at
Sean Cowper.
At Flood21.
At Dan Dankleton.
and at Pablo100, and Lee is at a total shunt.
Yes.
And also not here, and I'm not going to let him forget that. Just to say, as always, we have the extra podcast every week that we do for our wonderful Patreon subscribers who keep us in microphones, cables, hardware, spare mixers that we have to get bring in at the last minute,
Yeah.
things like that. Every penny that goes into the Patreon show
Goes back in.
straight back into the podcast. And you can sign up at patreon.com/3legs4wheels. I think that's about it for this week, isn't it?
I think so, yeah. Thanks
It's a
very much
short
again
show
to-
because Lee's
to-
not promoting a load of his podcasts tonight.
Yeah, if you want to find any of Lee's podcasts, look them up. And I am very happy to say we will be back next week with a preview of the
Wow.
Australian Grand Prix.
Yeah, boy.
Yes. So we'll see you then.
We will.
Bye-bye.
Bye.